Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Inez Robinson-Odom, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm so glad to be here, John.
It's a real pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from San Diego. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about your recent book, The Silent Rebellion, Becoming a Modern Leader. I love all things leadership. I also love this title. I love rebellion. I love making good trouble. I think it's necessary. I think we need more people willing to be courageous and stand up and make good trouble and even a little bit of rebellion in this world, challenge the status quo. And I think good leadership requires that. And so we're going to discuss this and unpack this. And as we explore your book together, really dive into this together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Inez's bio with everybody. Inez Robinson-Odom works in media, education, executive coaching, and social justice. She is vice president of professional development for Team Lewis and is based in San Diego, California. Inez, anything you would like to share with the audience by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in?
Sure. I mean, I think when I think about some of the things that are so important to me, one of which is that I worked on the documentary series Eyes on the Prize on the American Civil Rights Movement many years ago. And really, in many ways, that was a watershed experience that led to my really doing most of my career in creating media that matters.
I love that. I love anything that matters resonates with me. So doing media that matters. There's so much media out there that doesn't matter. You know, it's just noise, right? It's just stuff to pacify us and pass the time. And there's a place for that too, just to have brain candy. But doing stuff that matters and getting us engaged and involved is really, really important. And I love the work that you do in the social justice arena. The world needs it. You know, the messed up world that we're in, there's lots of great stuff out there. There's also stuff that needs to be worked on and improved. And we're all in it together. We need to work together to make that happen. Wonderful.
Yeah, excellent. Well, and indeed, John, one of the things that really catalyzed our writing this book was the recognition that leaders ask questions, good leaders ask questions, and it's sort of the rebellious leadership piece is really, quietly kind of asking the right questions and really ultimately doing sort of what I call the ALA, right? Ask, but then really listen, actively listen, and then act. It really is as simple as that. And often we try to sort of short circuit different parts of that process, but to make assumptions is kind of the leading indicator of complacency. If we assume that we know the answer, that's really a shortcut as opposed to asking the question. Even if you think you know the answer, ask and really be ready to listen and potentially even be surprised with what you hear and then ultimately take action.
Yeah. Some of the stupidest people I know are brilliant. They're so smart and so intelligent that they're just too arrogant. They're too they don't have enough intellectual humility, right? To question their own intelligence and to question their own understanding of whatever is going on around them. And I'm not just talking about, emotional intelligence. That's an issue too. But I'm just what you said, like staying curious. Because none of us, it doesn't matter how brilliant you are, none of us has all the answers. None of us has all the information. None of us understands all the variables going on in the world around us. And so regardless of how intelligent we are, we just don't know. And we have to be open to the possibility that we might be wrong. And that our assumptions might be wrong, and that our framing and our lens might be off. And if we can just have that intellectual humility about us as we go throughout the world and as we interact with other humans and as we try to tackle the most complex, perplexing challenges that the world throws at us, then maybe we have a fighting chance. But when we get dogmatic and we think we have all the answers and truth with a capital T, and we plow forward, and then we just start to draw battle lines, and we get all tribal, and we just start to
Right,
battle it out with each other.
right.
We get nowhere when that happens, right?
Well, I always think of Robert Burns, the great poet who said, "Oh, would I had the gift God gave us to see ourselves as others see us." And I think that's such an important lens that ultimately, even beyond sort of intellectual humility, is really self-awareness. That
Mm,
the leaders are self-aware. Frankly, they're lifelong learners. I mean,
yeah,
ultimately, there's to behave as if we know everything is not only arrogant, it just isn't possible. So to
yeah.
stay, as you said, to stay curious and to stay open to how can I really transform both the situation and, if needed, myself, because we live in a dynamic world. And so if we maintain a fixed position, that doesn't let us have the sort of nimble ability to pivot for any given situation that I think is so crucial in leadership.
And it's interesting because for a lot of people, that's seen as weakness for some reason. That baffles me. That's always baffled me. And maybe in this divisive political climate, that's been amped up. That we see, the ability to learn, to grow. That's how I would frame it. Other
Right,
people frame
right,
it as flip-flopping, as
right,
whatever. And I think, what we really just need to understand is that we all are moving through this world with an imperfect understanding. We're taking in new data all the time. We're, in fact, being bombarded by data constantly. We can't possibly
right,
consume it all or compute it all or understand it all. And
right.
so as we navigate and as we start to bring in new information and digest it, even if, like, I got the exact same information last week,
Mm,
I get it
mm,
again this week. Maybe I'm in a different place this week where I'm able to actually digest it differently and I can understand it differently. Hopefully, that can inform the way I understand things, right? Hopefully, and
mm,
hopefully, if I do digest that, hopefully I'm willing at that point to accept that data. Hopefully, I'm willing to accept that evidence, and I'm willing to change my position if if it necessitates it, right? Like if it actually points me in a different direction. I hope I'm willing to learn and grow and move and shift and change based on where the evidence takes me. I hope I'm willing to do that. And I hope I'm not so entrenched.
mm.
And that's hard though, because as humans, we like to feel, confident in our position, and we like to feel that stability, and we like our tribe, and we like um, our conceptual frameworks, and you
Well,
know,
and
uh, go
I
ahead.
think you're spot on. And really, we know nowadays the most precious commodity out there, it's not cash, it's not gold, it's not oil, it's attention. Who can
Mm,
grab your attention? And that's literally, we are bombarded with sort of the fight for our attention, whether it's our device, whether it's our LinkedIn profile, you name it. People are trying to, they're competing for your attention. And so ultimately, you want to use people's time and attention really tactically. And in the book, one of the things that we've developed is what we call a living book, that we
mm,
recognize that none of us are ever too far away from the infamous device of our cell phones. And so we leaned into that with this book by providing QR codes throughout the book so that it added a new dimension. It also really got to the idea of finding the right channel. Ultimately, if you're trying to reach people who are perhaps south of the age of 30, we know
mhm.
they do that now with images, with videos, with messaging that is very different than those that might be north of 70, right? Who are
Mhm.
probably sitting down with a physical newspaper and engaging in that way. So you find the right channel that's going to ultimately allow everyone to access your meta message. And so that was a really big thing for us. But we also recognize that leadership has to be bringing people together. It has to be unifying and healing if it does nothing else. And that really the currency of leadership is hope. And so we've devoted a whole chapter. The final chapter of the book is on the topic of hope, which we've had a
Hmm.
number of people say to us, hope in a leadership book? What is this? The sky
I
is
like
falling.
that. Yeah.
In fact, ultimately, I mean, hope is in and of itself the currency of leadership. It's what a leader must bring, and good leaders are servant leaders. Good leaders
Yeah.
recognize that when the team is successful, all boats rise, so to speak, right? And that good leaders are not going up on the hill so they can stand there and say, look at me, look at me. Good leaders are climbing the hill so they can look over the horizon and say, I see what's coming. Hey, everybody, this is where we're headed. So it's a paradigm shift. And it's nothing new. Servant leadership is certainly not a new
Yeah.
concept, but we talk about the four H's of leadership, sort of servant leadership in particular: hungry, happy, hardworking, and honest. That really, and that's why we ended up within the book, we've profiled 11 different cause leaders. These are
Hmm.
people who are running charities, running nonprofits, the third sector. And what we found was that they were really sort of the canaries in the coal mine, that in many ways, while we had, the government and other sectors, and then we have the corporate sector, they become that kind of voice for the everyman in terms of the struggles that we're all dealing with in different ways, whether it's disenfranchisement. Well, what form does that take? And how do we learn those lessons? So that was a huge part of the book that was just such a gift for us.
I love that. And I also am a huge advocate for servant leadership as a philosophy, as a guidepost for how we approach, how we engage with other people, and also recognizing that leadership sometimes accompanies, a formal title, a formal role, actual position authority, those sorts of things, like what we normally think about when we think about a leader. And I really do hope that someone with position authority, title, role, I hope that they are servant leaders, because I think they tend to be the more influential, the more sustainable type of positive leader that we all hope to see. But also recognizing that you don't have to have that position, you don't have to have that title or that role to be an impactful leader. And others can be powerful servant leaders as well, and have huge impact in their organizations, in their communities, in their networks, uh, by being servant leaders and lifting others around them as well.
And again, not in sort of a Pollyanna way. I mean, both Chris and I, Team Lewis is a wildly profitable, financially profitable.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we understand key performance indicators. We know those things that you need to get business done. But ultimately, our feeling is that if you can integrate these things, the things that we talk about into the book, into your leadership style, it's going to make you more effective. It's going to make you more able to bring the types of success that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's not an either or. And I do sometimes I hear from people and they think, oh, servant leadership, that's just fluffy, right? That's just making everyone feel good. And I'm like, no, that's actually not what it's about. And if that's what you think it's about, you don't understand servant leadership. And there's a lot of literature out there on this.
Sure.
And if you get below the surface, maybe if you only have a surface level, maybe that's what you think. But there's really a lot more depth to it. And like you said, I think a good servant leader also is one that drives results, and
Right.
and and they drive sustainable results. And that's the difference. So an autocratic leader, an authoritarian type of a leader, they might get results in the short term, that they can use carrot and stick. They can get compliance, and they can get people out of fear to do stuff in the short term, but it's not sustainable, and it doesn't drive commitment, and people don't do it, out of intrinsic motivation. People
Um,
are doing it, really out of fear or out of their own self-interest in the moment. And ultimately it doesn't drive those positive outcomes that organizations want to see, that happen more organically in more sustainable ways. Whereas a servant leader can drive positive outcomes that actually are sustainable, that actually can live with the organization and grow with the organization and with the team. So the outcomes actually are better when you have someone who can espouse and really live the tenets of a true servant leader. It's not just fluffy, right?
and who among us doesn't want to be the best version of themselves?
Yeah.
Who among us doesn't want to be optimized? And the way to do that really is, to lean into how can I, if you bring your own self-awareness, that self-awareness will ultimately translate into your being a better leader. And
Hmm.
talk about even the notion that when something wonderful happens for the organization, a good leader shares the credit. It was, acknowledges the team, etc. When something bad happens, oftentimes the leader takes the hit. The good leaders
Yeah.
take the hit. They don't point out, they point in, right? And so truly, I mean, it's that it also gets into personal responsibility. It gets into how do how do you want to show up, and how are you intrinsically motivated? And uh, take a little self inventory. And a great safe way of doing that is to get a coach, get someone that can
Hmm.
actually be an executive leadership coach, a professional coach that can really help you walk through who you are and what matters. And it's interesting. Even one of the people that we interview in the book is a woman, Dr. Cynthia Nguyen. She's a psychiatrist who is also on the adjunct faculty at Stanford. And, I'm going to take the liberty of even just reading some of the things that you talked about, that sort of in a post-pandemic business setting, the things that people are valuing are things like providing work-life balance, planning for elder and child care for those who are managing aging parents and children, of which, many of us are, right? Finding meaning in their work, helping the earth survive, building culture in the virtual space along with the in-person workplace, providing in-person work opportunities to combat isolation, supporting mental health and providing wellness benefits and support, reducing a toxic workplace environment, and allowing people to really operate at their own pace. I mean, the pandemic did many things, but I think it also, some of that isolation, for those who spun it well, people learned how to set their own rhythms, and they discovered that, wow, I'm wildly more productive at 2 a.m. than I am at 2 p.m., right? And so how do good leaders, good managers figure out how to really get people to their sweet spot?
Yeah. And understanding just the individuality of it, and not trying to fit everyone, every round peg into a square hole, everyone into the same mold, whatever cliche you want to use. But we really did discover that, I think, during the pandemic. And I think it's a bit of a travesty that now, we're 4 years out, right? And we're post-pandemic. We learned all these lessons. And now it seems like most executives are trying to like revert back to pre-pandemic um styles, pre-pandemic days, cultures, policy, like, and it's not just back to office mandates, though that's one of them. And I'm not a big fan of that. Not because I think it's bad to have people come back to the office. I think the idea of just having a mandate for everybody is weird and silly after everything that we learned. Like, shouldn't it just seems like, shouldn't we have something that's a little bit more flexible? Shouldn't we have something that perhaps is a little bit more targeted towards different teams and different units that allows them to do what works for them. That it seems like that's what makes sense. And that's what we learned through the pandemic. Yet we see so many leaders going more rigid. And I guess I just don't understand why, but that's what's happening. And so we have this tension, pendulum swings, right, back and forth, and we'll see, what continues to happen, with those pendulum swings. But ultimately, I think what we definitely see from the workforce is that they got a taste of the flexibility. They learned that they like it. They learned to how to leverage their own productivity with that flexibility, and they want it moving forward, whether or not organizations want to give it to them. And we'll see how that tension plays out over time.
Well, and hopefully at the end of the day, even a hybrid setting is a valuable one because we're ultimately, what did we used to do to punish people? Or what do we still do to punish people? We isolate them. We put them in solitary confinement. I mean, we are, as human beings, need to be in fellowship with one another, and not just through a screen, but indeed to be able to see the whole person and to laugh and to connect. And, a final sort of thought that Chris and I were really passionate about in terms of the book was humor and
Mhm.
recognizing that, having fun, being able to laugh, that there's actually a lot of that gets revealed. We think humor should be taken seriously, right? It shows time,
Mhm.
it shows judgment, it shows terms of reference. I mean, so let us, in this age of AI, lead with humanity in the workplace.
Yeah. Leading with humanity is so important. And I think that's at the crux of what it means to be a good leader, especially in the modern world of work. And as we move into the future of work, more automation, more AI, more disruptive technologies, leading with humanity, being a servant leader, having more emotional intelligence, leading with empathy and compassion, right? These are all going to be core competencies, core capabilities of the next gen leader, that we all need to foster, that we all need to create. I think that's really important, very powerful stuff that we all need to remember. And it's also worth noting, hopefully it's obvious, but it's also worth noting that that while it's not rocket science and it's not necessarily completely new, it's also quite different than how previous generations thought of leadership, right? If you go back just a generation or two and you think about like the stereotypical leader, everything you and I just said probably doesn't show up on most people's lists.
Yeah.
So, things are changing. And the fact that we still have, the vast majority of senior leadership positions, executive positions are still being filled by more senior members of the workforce. It makes sense, right? There's still that tension. But over time, there are going to be more millennials filling those roles. There's going to be more Gen Z workers
Right.
filling those roles. There's going to be shifts. Those shifts are going to continue to happen. It's going to be a wild ride as we see a whole lot of transition occurring in the workforce.
Well, I hope not too wild, because I mean, ultimately, we in chapter 6, we talk about what does leadership look and sound like. And in some ways, one of the we are we are in a wonderful moment. We're in a wonderful place because in many ways, it's an opportunity. And what has happened is that because of the pandemic, many older workers left the workplace. They just, people pieced out, I'm out of here, right? Well, what we need to do now is take those who have the more veteran perspective and let them share the best of that with these younger folks who are coming up, Generation Z, Generation Alpha, even to equip them, because in many ways, the 4 years that we experienced with the pandemic, and one can give and take on that number as well, but
Yeah.
those years, they missed some crucial developmental steps that in many ways the more veteran members of your workforce have. And so if there can be this incredible opportunity, good leaders are looking for ways to bridge that, where the wisdom and the knowledge base meets the technology and the tech savvy and the AI driven folks and get them talking and building rapport and leveraging so that the best of both get married.
This has just been such a wonderful conversation. I know we could go on, but thankfully, you have a wonderful book that people can check out to find out more. As we start to wrap up, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, where they can find your book, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm so grateful for this opportunity. The book is available on Amazon. The title is The Silent Rebellion: Becoming a Modern Leader. We love our publisher, which is Kogan Page. They're a London-based publisher, and you can also go to the Kogan Page website to purchase the book as well. And, certainly one of the things that we are so passionate about is you can always go on to LinkedIn. You can find me, Inez Odom. You can find my colleague, Chris Lewis, and the Team Lewis Foundation. We are excited to say that part of the proceeds from the book will go to the foundation. So some of the charities that you read about in the book will be directly
Mm.
benefit from the sale of the book. So that means a lot to us as well. So I think my final thought would be words matter.
Mm.
All we have are our words. And so I think if you're a leader, a modern leader, and wanting to be a great and amazing modern leader, you learn how to use your words in a way that uplift and that edify. And again, I would invite people to remember ask, listen, and act.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's just been a wonderful opportunity to sit down and talk with you. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected with Inez, find out more about what she can do for you, check out the book. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.